Hey everybody. When a whale makes their very first purchase with your online business, how long do you have that whale for? What is their average customer life cycle? How many more interactions or login days will they have with your mobile game or online business before they churn out? Well, today I'm going to walk you through the analysis behind me so that you can apply it to your own business and get that question answered. So to step into the analysis a little bit, we have a chart that has days since first purchase on the x-axis. That number is always going to be increasing no matter what. And then on the y-axis, we have the cumulative number of login days per whale. So right at the moment where that curve flatlines is the average life cycle for your whale cohort. And in this online or demo business, it's about 80 days or 80 logins. And if whales are logging in every single day, day over day, that's about 3 months from first purchase to churn for a whale in this demo business. So let's go ahead and jump in and nail down the technical details in MySQL together. Okay, so we're going to start with a revenue transaction table, but before that, we're going to declare a variable above that, ensuring that our query that we write together is dynamic. So in this specific example, we are going to filter our data for customers in the top 1% of your spender cohort. So we're going to declare a variable up at the top so that you can dynamically change this to take the top 5% or 10% or 15%. So let's do that now. It just adds more flexibility to your query. So we're going to do set. We're going to call this top percent. And right now we're going to set it to 0.01 or top 1%. Okay, great. So here are just a few sample records from our revenue transaction table. It's just revenue transactions by customer. So the next thing we need to do is just get the first purchase date and a total summation of revenue by customer ID, and that'll represent their lifetime revenue. So we will do customer ID, and then we will take the purchase date. And we just want them in here. We will call this first purchase date. And then we want a summation of total revenue by customer ID. We're going to use a coalesce here, and this will just serve as a guardrail, converting any null values to 0 so that the aggregation doesn't get messed up. And then let's round that revenue to the nearest whole number. So 0 decimal places. We'll call this lifetime revenue. And then we want to group by customer ID. Okay, let's run a few records. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we're going to use lifetime revenue to identify and filter for just the top 1% of spenders, aka your whales. And again, we can change that by changing the value assigned to this variable up here. We want to take the top 5%, we can just do this. But for now, we're going to take the top 1%. The min purchase date, which creates our first purchase date value per customer, is going to be used for us to calculate the x-axis in the analysis, which is days since first purchase. Okay, wonderful. So we are ready for the next step. Let's go ahead and put that in a subselect. We can just call this purchasers. So let's bring in all the fields from our previous subselect. We're going to need the purchaser's prefix. Let's add in that prefix. Okay, great. So now we are ready to add two window functions that are going to help us to identify the top 1% of your purchasers. The first one's going to be row number over, and we're going to order by lifetime revenue descending. So the customer that has the absolute most revenue is going to get the value of 1. Then the customer with the second most amount of revenue is going to get the value of 2, so on and so forth. We're going to call this revenue index. And then we need one more thing, which is a second window function that's going to count the total number of purchasers in this data set. So we will do count over nothing. Call those total records. Let me go ahead and run this variable up here, and then we can run the query below. One thing we need to do is make sure that the customer with the most amount of revenue gets the value of 1. So we need to add descending here. Let's rerun this. Okay, great. So our most valuable purchaser has a lifetime revenue of $363 for this demo business. Our second most valuable customer has a lifetime revenue of $360. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and wrap all of that into another subselect, and we can just call it monetizers. Different name, but referring to the same thing. Let's bring up all of our fields. We'll add the monetizer's prefix. Okay, so here is how we're going to use these two columns together. So in the where clause, we're going to say this, where, say case when the revenue index or revenue ranked descendingly by customer, with the customer with the highest revenue at the top with a value of 1, divided by the total number of monetizers, has to be less than or equal to 1%, or this variable that we declared up here. If so, then 1, else 0 end. And then we're going to set this equal to 1. So that you can see this, we put a case statement in our where clause and set the resulting value of that case statement to 1, which is going to filter the data set just for whales in the top 1%. So again, to go over this again, what we're doing is we created two window functions. This first one basically orders revenue descendingly, with the highest lifetime revenue receiving the value of 1, the second highest 2, the third highest 3, and then in a column right next to that, we're getting the total number of records or total number of purchasers. And then we're dividing the two, and if it's less than or equal to 1%, then they are in the top 1%. And we're setting it to 1 to make sure that we're only bringing back those whales that are in the top 1%. Okay, so let's see how many whales are in the top 1% for this demo business. Great, so here are all of our whales. We have 73 whales in the top 1% for this online business. Cool, so we are ready for the next step. We can go ahead and discard these 2 fields here because we don't need them. Let's put that all in a subselect and call it whales, since we have them now. And let's swap out that prefix, call this whales. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to bring in leading dates, or dates that are greater than or equal to the whale's first purchase date, so that we can calculate and create that x-axis, which is days since first purchase. So we're going to bring those date values in from our date table, and it's just called dim date. And it's just a SQL table with 2 columns, the second column, a column full of dates. So we're going to do a left join over to dim date. We're going to alias the table dates. We'll do it on the date being greater than or equal to the whale's first purchase date. Let's make sure we can visually see and return those leading date values by doing this. We can call this leading dates. And let's run a few records. Okay, great. Now let's add the column that's going to be used for our x-axis, which is days since first purchase date. So we will do date diff between this leading date and the first purchase date. And we'll call this days since first purchase. Can rerun it and make sure that that field or column got created, and it did. All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and contain this in yet another subselect. We can call it forward dates. Let's bring up our fields, change the prefix out to forward dates. Okay, great. So the next thing we need to do is for each leading date value per whale, we need to calculate the cumulative or running total of login days so that we can figure out by day since first purchase, which is always going to be incrementing no matter what is the cumulative number of login days per whale. So to do that, we're going to have to join to our login table, just a customer logins table. It's called fact player login. My mistake, I believe it's called fact player logins, plural. There we go. So let's do a left join over to fact player logins. We will rename this to logins and we will do it on forward dates.customer ID equals logins.customer ID and logins.login date has to be greater than or equal to the forward dates dot first purchase date, and it also has to be less than or equal to whatever the current leading date value is. And then what we're going to do is count the number of logins or login days that they've had by that specific leading date value per whale. We'll do a count here and call this login days. We need to group this. And let's run a few records together. Okay, great. So here is our data. We're only bringing across 1,000 random records, but this is going to illustrate what's happening. So we have a whale here that had their first purchase date April 7, 2023 with a lifetime revenue of $363. They're in the top 1%. And then we have all these leading dates, and all of these leading dates are greater than or equal to the first purchase date, stretching up to the present day. And then what we're doing is we're counting the number of logins or login days this specific whale has had by this date, by this leading date right here. So the logic is count the number of login days this whale has had between this first purchase date of April 7, 2023 and this leading date of December 31st, 2024. And the number of login days has been 101. So it's creating this running total or cumulative count by these leading date values, which are incrementing by 1 and doing a summation of login days between whatever the leading date value is or whatever the new leading date value is and the first purchase date. Okay, awesome. So believe it or not, we're actually ready to aggregate our data. We will do an ag. So again, we just renamed this entire subselect ag. And then we'll do ag dot days since first purchase. And then what we want to do is just get a count of whales. And then we want a summation of those cumulative or running total login days. So we will do ag.login days and just do a sum here. Call it cumulative login days. And what we're going to do to create our analysis is take this summation and divide it by the number of whales. Let's make sure everything is good to go. We don't need the customer ID. First purchase date, we only need for days since first purchase, which we have. Lifetime revenue, we don't need because we just used it to filter for the top 1% of whales. Leading dates, we don't need because we're using it to calculate days since first purchase. And then days since first purchase is being used and referenced up here. And then login days is being summed. So let's go ahead and group by this. Let's clean this up and delete this other stuff underneath. And let's go ahead and run our final query together. Okay, great. So here is our data. Let's go ahead and export this, take it over to Excel, and finish our analysis over there. Okay, so here we are in Excel. The only thing we need to do is take cumulative logins and divide it by the number of whales. And we will call this cumulative logins per whale. And we will take this and let's just remove those decimal places. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move this over to a pivot table. We will do days since first purchase in the rows, and we will do a label filter where it's less than or equal to 540. Let's just look at the leading 18 months. And then we want the cumulative logins per whale, which because it's cumulative, it's either going to be staying the same flat or increasing by days since first purchase. Let's rename that. Let's remove the grand totals off for rows and columns. And here we are. So I'm going to delete this title up here. We can delete that legend. Let me make this a little thicker so you can see it. Increase the weight. Want to increase these access values as well. Just make everything more visible for you. Okay. And then let me add an indicator in here that'll be super helpful. And I'm adding this because what we're doing with this analysis is we're building a curve, and for us the most important thing is identifying when that curve begins to flatline. So why does it flatline? It flatlines because days since first purchase is still increasing incrementally by units of 1, whereas logins or cumulative logins per whale is only going to be increasing when the whale is active with your business. When they churn out, it's going to begin to flatline, and that'll mark the end or the completion of their life cycle. So in this online business or mobile game behind me, what you can see is that whales on average have a life cycle of about 80 or 90 login days from their first purchase date. So a whale will make their first purchase, and within 80 or 90 days or login days, they essentially churn out. So as a business owner, this is super useful information because it helps you to strategize around the amount of time or the number of interactions you're expecting on average from your most lucrative cohort. So this has so many product strategy implications, and in addition to that, has other uses that you can leverage as well. So for example, if your mobile game or online business is building a VIP, VVIP, or loyalty program, having this information is key to building the framework of that loyalty program, because now you know how long a whale is expected to be interacting with your business starting from their first purchase date. Anyway, I hope you found this tutorial useful. Thank you very much. Have a great day.